The last passenger. It was a cold Friday night when Daniel finished his work at a small supermarket near the edge of town. The streets were almost empty, and a thick fog covered the road like a gray blanket. Normally, his older brother picked him up after work, but that night his phone battery died and he could not call anyone. The last bus of the night was arriving in 10 minutes, so Daniel decided to wait at the old bus stop near the forest. The bus stop was silent. There were no cars, no people, and no sounds except the wind moving through the trees. Daniel sat on the bench and looked at his watch. It was 11:47 p.m. A few minutes later, headlights appeared in the distance. The bus slowly came closer and stopped in front of him. Daniel immediately noticed something strange. The bus looked old, much older than the buses that normally traveled through the town. The paint was faded and several windows were cracked. The doors opened with a loud metallic sound. Daniel stepped inside and looked around. There were only 3 passengers. An old woman sat near the back, staring out the window. A man wearing a black coat sat in the middle of the bus with his head lowered. Near the front sat a young girl holding a small teddy bear. Nobody spoke. Nobody even looked at him. The silence felt heavy and uncomfortable. Daniel paid the driver and sat near a window. As the bus moved forward, he noticed that the route was different. Instead of turning toward the center of town, the bus continued along a narrow road that passed through the forest. Daniel stood up and walked toward the driver. "Excuse me, I think you're going the wrong way," he said. The driver did not answer. Daniel repeated the question, but the driver remained completely silent. When he looked more closely, he felt a chill run through his body. The driver was not moving at all. His hands stayed fixed on the steering wheel, and his eyes stared straight ahead without blinking. Daniel slowly returned to his seat. His heart was beating faster now. He looked outside, but the forest seemed endless. The fog had become thicker, and he could barely see the trees. Suddenly, he noticed something even stranger. The old woman, the man in the black coat, and the little girl were all looking directly at him. None of them smiled. None of them moved. They simply stared. Daniel felt fear growing inside him. He stood up and walked toward the emergency exit. He pushed it once. Nothing happened. He pushed harder. The door would not open. At that moment, he heard a small voice behind him. "You shouldn't be here." Daniel turned around. The little girl was standing in the aisle holding her teddy bear. Her face looked pale under the weak lights of the bus. "What do you mean?" Daniel asked. The girl lowered her eyes. "This bus is not for the living." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. He wanted to laugh, to tell himself it was some kind of joke, but the fear in the girl's voice felt real. "What are you talking about?" The girl looked toward the other passengers. "They don't remember anymore. They've been here for a long time. But I remember. I remember the accident." Before Daniel could ask another question, the lights inside the bus began to flicker. The old woman slowly stood up. The man in the black coat lifted his head for the first time. Daniel gasped. The man's face was covered with deep scars, and one of his eyes was completely white. "The accident?" Daniel whispered. The little girl nodded. "Many years ago, this bus crashed in the forest. Nobody survived." The lights flickered again. This time, all the passengers began standing one by one. Their faces looked different now. Pale skin, empty eyes, broken expressions. Daniel backed away until he reached the rear of the bus. "I want to leave," he said. The little girl pointed toward the front window. Daniel looked outside. The bus was approaching a bridge. Beneath the bridge, he could see twisted metal covered by years of rust. It looked like the remains of an old vehicle. Then he understood. It was the bus. The same bus. The bus that had crashed years ago. The vehicle suddenly began shaking violently. The passengers slowly walked toward him. The old woman stretched out a trembling hand. The man with the scarred face stared without blinking. Daniel closed his eyes and ran toward the front of the bus. He pushed past the driver and grabbed the steering wheel. The moment he touched it, everything disappeared. When Daniel opened his eyes, he was lying on the ground beside the road. The sun was rising and birds were singing in the trees. A police officer was kneeling beside him. "Are you okay?" the officer asked. Daniel sat up slowly. "What happened?" "We found you unconscious near the old bridge." "You're lucky." Daniel looked around. The bus was gone. The passengers were gone. Everything was gone. Years later, he still remembered that night. He never found an explanation for what happened. But sometimes, when the fog is thick and the roads are empty, people in that town report seeing an old bus driving through the forest. The strange thing is that nobody ever sees it stop. And according to every witness, there is always one empty seat waiting for a new passenger.
Remember to subscribe, turn on notifications, like the video, and leave a comment telling me what you'd like the next video to be about.